All right, we're going to bring up our third and final panel now. And Jay Warona, the Deputy Executive Director and General Counsel of the New York State School Boards Association, will be facilitating this panel. And we'll just give them a moment to get seated and mic'd up.
Test. So, hi everybody. That's your cue. Hi. Okay, welcome back. As Melinda indicated, I'm Jay Warona. I serve as Deputy Executive Director and General Counsel of the New York State School Boards Association. I'm joined by my President, Sandy Rufo, my Executive Director, Bob Schneider. We couldn't be more proud and pleased to be here. Melinda, we thank you for your leadership. Let's hear it from Melinda in convening all of us together. We all know, and everyone in this room knows, that this is an issue we have to get right. Failure is not an option. So what we're all trying to figure out is, what is the best way to get that right? And what we've heard this morning, let's just to review, and then I'm going to introduce this great panel, and we're going to have a great conversation. But throughout the day, we heard multiple school districts that individually indicated to you that they had decided that it was appropriate to ban student cell phone usage during the school day. And we've heard testimony from many of these individuals, and you all were part of this audience, so I'm just reviewing what you've already heard, that there were many positive benefits that served as the outcome of this decision for each of these districts. And so moving forward, as the last panel was talking about, the question, I suppose, is whether cell phone bans should remain an individual decision of school districts as it is presently, or whether the state should come up with a uniform policy for all 700 districts. And as Michael Mulgrew said before, and he's so right, this is a political decision. And whatever we decide to do with that, what we're going to talk about on this panel is not more important, even though Randy Weingarten indicated before that this is the most important panel, and we appreciate her saying that. But we really want to talk about what constitutes digital literacy. Because at the end of the day, folks, I don't know if you got the memo. This nation is politically divided. Did you guys get that memo? And you know how people talk at each other? We don't talk with each other anymore. And part of that problem is that people are not really part of the same set of facts that they're arguing over, right? And so our kids, the hope is that they're going to come out of this equation being able to be the best conservative Republicans or the best liberal Democrats or everything in between, to have critical thinking skills. That's very important, and we're not providing any ideology to these kids, as some people across the nation will accuse us. But the question is, are we doing the best job we can to make them media literate, to understand how to discern fact from fiction? And that's a very, very important concept. So what we're going to do today in this panel, and I'm joined here, we have David Moynihan. There he is. We didn't meet before, so hi. And he's the campaign director of Fair Play. And when we talk to each of these guys and women, they will tell you what their organizations do, because we have national people here and statewide people. We have Graham Dugoni, who is the founder of Yondr. You have all those pouches on your tables. He indicates to me he's going to autograph every one of those for you before. We have my friend Dr. Jeffrey Matteson, who's the Senior Deputy Commissioner for Educational Policy at the New York State Education Department. And we have Julie Scelfo, who's the founder of Mothers Against Media Addiction. And finally, Amany Dgheim, who's the president of the New York State PTA. So let's hear it for this panel, folks. So what we want to talk about really is not what we've been talking about all day. We'll get it right as to what would constitute the best way to ban cell phones and help kids. But what we want them to do is to have a skill set that allows them to be digitally literate. So I'm going to go down the panel. We'll start at the very end, and I'm going to ask you to give us a brief definition of what at least you believe and what your organization believes constitutes the definition of digital literacy. And is it a necessary skill? Let's start in the very back here. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yvette Renteria. I am the Chief Program Officer at Common Sense Media. So in your pamphlets, you see a lot of the data in there, and we continually try to learn as much as we can about our young people and how they're using the digital, how their digital lives look. And when we think about digital literacy, about 15 years ago, we developed a kindergarten through 12th grade curriculum. And at the time, it was really centered around just being responsible, having responsible use of technology, whether it's about learning, creating, or participating. And now, fast forward to where we are, it's really interesting that we've built a well-being component to this space. So not only is it understanding what algorithms do, not only is it understanding how the internet works and what goes behind the screens, but now it's starting to incorporate how we're feeling and what it's doing and how it's impacting our everyday lives when it comes to just our social emotional learning. So here at Common Sense, we do develop this curriculum, and we do really focus on not only what's happening behind the screens to ensure that our young people, as well as our educators, because we do provide training, what that looks like, but also how it makes you feel and be able to have that human connection and that dialogue to continually evaluate and assess how we use our technology every day.
And real briefly, just tell the folks, how did school districts that are represented access your information? That's important, right?
So we're a nonprofit organization, so all of our lessons, all of our trainings are free to everyone online. We're also working at getting it within the LMS Canvas and Schoology in the coming year, and we are going to have a brand new updated curriculum that's going to incorporate AI literacy in our 25-26 school year. So yes, free resources for educators, students, and school leaders.
Thank you. And Jeff Matteson, of course, being pretty much second in command at SED, great friend of all of ours. It's important to bring this conversation beyond what folks around the country are thinking about doing, and these are some pretty important people here on this panel, Jeff. But let's talk about what our own state education department is envisioning in this space. What are you guys working on? And what is the definition of digital literacy as far as the New York State Education Department is concerned?
So the most important thing for everybody to know is as of September of 2024, that's this month, the new learning standards for computer science and digital fluency are live and are to be implemented in all our school districts. So digital literacy is actually a mandate in our state. There are learning standards associated with digital fluency in our state. They're available. What we should see in our schools, because it's been a 7-year run-up to this, because what we are doing is allowing computer science teachers to get certified. So we had some people to do the computer science end of things, but the digital fluency end of things, as part of these standards, is for all educators. Anytime a student is going to interact with anything digital is an opportunity for a lesson from an adult with a child. So digital literacy is being able to interact with any kind of digital text, understanding where it's coming from, how to discern it, how to use it, employ it in their own learning, and really how to handle it in a way that an adult would handle it. Well, a reasonable adult that's well-educated would handle it, because, let's face it, that a lot of what ails us is adults behaving badly, because not just some of the examples we've set, but also we understand adults have created these addictive technologies as a profit motive. We are a capitalist country, and people have made money off of these algorithms and what we've presented on the devices. All the more reason for us to take the digital fluency standards seriously, to go back to our schools and say, we need to break these down and see how we're going to start introducing them from the earliest ages, because they're age appropriate, they're listed by grade level, all the way up through to when they're a graduate. And again, they're learning standards adopted by the Board of Regents, and they're not optional. They are a required set of learning standards with computer science and digital fluency.
So Jeff, on a scale of 0 to 100%, 100% being fantastic, where are we as a state right now? I understand the where we're trying to get to, but are we in trouble right now, or are we almost there?
We're not almost there, and we're closer to being in trouble than we are to being almost there.
Yeah. Wow, that's so grim.
And there's pockets of it, and understand, we haven't been able to ramp up getting enough people certified in computer science quickly. We only have a few programs across the state, which is why we had a 7-year period where districts could get people certified if they had taught a computer science course, even if they weren't certified during that period of time. That window closed September 1st. We had many people go that route. Some people started the process and never finished the process. But I think we got to continue to have this conversation that we've had a resource. We've had the foundation to kind of bring these right into our schools, and some great people thought through the standards, and there's some wonderful resources on our website that we're going to reintroduce. We're going to bring it back up and say, hey, remember, this is the month where we're starting to require the computer science and digital fluency standards. So we're going to do these things to help the field, and the field needs to start engaging this conversation, because I think we really believe that this is not a quick problem to solve, which is why you create K-12 standards around the problem, so you can educate a child through their whole career. And at the end, there'll be a digital fluent student and an adult who will be able to handle what's coming at them, whether it's on a phone, on a screen, or on a computer.
Thanks, Jeff. So Graham, you represent a company that's international, right? So in addition to telling us about what constitutes digital literacy, which you're going to answer because it's the same question everybody else gets, I am interested in your response kind of from that international perspective, right? Because this is the family of the state of New York. We're all here trying to figure this out, but you're looking at this at a much higher level because you've been all over the world with this problem. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure, I'm happy to. Yeah, look, I guess we've been creating phone-free spaces and phone-free schools around the world for 10 years. And when we started out, we were very deliberate in choosing that language of phone-free spaces and phone-free schools, because underlying the whole concept is the idea that we're not taking something away from young people or people in general, we're giving them something back. And the genesis for us is the idea that digital natives walking into the world, I think we have to get in their headspace, and I've heard people talk about that tonight. It's a different experience to be a human in the world with a phone in your pocket than it is without one. And if you're a young person stepping through the world and all the possibilities that brings, I think we have to, it's my generation's responsibility to lay down a structure where they can experience the world with it, with technology, and a world without it. And to me, in terms of digital literacy, that's the foundational principle, is trying to impart on this younger generation the difference between the online world and the physical world around them, not negating either one, but teaching them the difference. So as they get older, and that is our goal, is to help these young people move into adulthood, they're going to be able to make their own choices. And so over 10 years internationally, what we've seen is it's fascinating as we help districts and states roll out phone-free schools. There are different cultures and different systems, but the fundamental issue is absolutely universal of young people and how they relate to the world. And what we've seen is when you create a phone-free space, and this goes for adults too, because we do large shows, so I've watched literally over 1 million people walk in and out of phone-free spaces, and I've observed what happens to them. I've observed what happens with their body, the way they interact, the way their hand goes to their phone. What we've seen is if you just create a structure and a blocker for the impulse, what you're doing is you're allowing them to recalibrate and form new habits and try to separate the phone from their nervous system, which is what happens with digital media, is it patterns your system of thinking, your visual conception of things, and your thought processes. So for us, just opening that space for people is, I feel like, a foundational thing we can build off towards digital literacy. And it's absolutely incredible to see what happens inside the space. It does not take much time. People are very adaptable, especially young people, at going back to the things that are most natural and probably most healthy for all of us.
Well, Graham, I know you practice what you preach because you were sitting at my table, you locked up your phone. I have to confess, I couldn't do it, just couldn't do it. And I appreciate that. But internationally, where is the rest of the world with this? Because obviously cell phone addiction with algorithms and everything we've talked about this throughout the day, this is a problem. So just give us a context of what's happening around the world.
I would say if you had asked that question a few years ago, I would have said there were different countries in Europe or Australia that were maybe a little bit ahead in terms of policy. If you fast forward to today, I think there are states, New York is one of them, that have zoomed into the lead, especially because I think there's now an understanding that just talking about a phone ban is not enough, because you're dealing with supporting educators on the ground to actually make that policy effective and engaging their communities, which everyone has spoken about. I cannot emphasize how important that is. It's a community issue. You have to engage all the stakeholders, including students. But at this point in time, I really would say that a state like New York in the United States has kind of zoomed to the front, and it's incredibly exciting for us to see after 10 years.
Thank you so much for that. So David, you're with Fair Play. Tell everybody what Fair Play is and where do you all fit into this equation here?
Sure, thank you so much. So Fair Play is the leading watchdog of consumer practices that are impacting young people. We educate the public on the ways that commercialism and big tech practices in particular are changing childhood, the way kids are being targeted and manipulated. And we've been working, Mary Rohde spoke so eloquently today about parents who have been advocating for protections from lawmakers. And we've been helping to elevate voices of parents for the need for the Kids Online Safety Act. We've also been working on a toolkit for phone-free schools, and that's one of the reasons we're really excited to be here today. So Fair Play worked along with another organization, the Phone-Free Schools Movement, to create a toolkit, which is free, and I spoke with some of you about it outside, and if you haven't gotten our card, you can get it on your way out. But it's a toolkit for administrators about how you can tackle the task of gauging sentiment in your school and in your community for phone-free schools, the way you can demonstrate how urgent the need is. And you know, one of the things about the urgency of the need for conversations about digital literacy, it's so exciting to see 500 people in this room who thought that this issue was so important today. And I think you'll agree, we're kind of preaching to the choir somewhat. With folks in this room get it, right? So I imagine that many of you educators are excited because you're thinking, on Monday, I need to talk to somebody at my school and bring some of this energy, right? Now, the person you need to speak to is probably someone who's had conversations about this, right? They understand the issue, but you may feel like you need to move the needle with them. Well, when you think about parents, there are a lot of parents who don't get exposed to the fact that this is an issue, and that they are right to have concerns, and the fact that their family is having a tug of war every night about the amount of time kids are spending, and about the fact that parents are worried about the well-being of their child and what they're being exposed to, and there's all this acrimony in the house about it. Well, there are a lot of parents who need support, who need other parents to say, I'm worried about that too. I don't like what's going on either. So digital literacy is a really important way to help inform parents. Why does it matter? What are kids being exposed to? How are they being manipulated every time they're online? How are they being lured to spend 6 hours when they were only thinking they would spend a few minutes? What are the harms? How is this impacting them? And it was mentioned earlier today about having the conversation in your home, speaking that language. And I think one of the challenges will be to explain to your kids. One of the students today talked about, it's not about punishment, it's about protection. So a good digital literacy program will allow a parent to have those conversations in the home, explain to kids, this is why I'm worried about you. I'm not trying to punish you or take away something that you like, but I want you to be safe when you're using the internet, and that's so important. So let's have conversations so we can set up practices in the house that work well for our family.
Well, that's an excellent point, right? Because I'll speak for myself as an older guy, right? I would need to understand how to instruct kids, right? My kids are all grown. I'm happy that they're not young now. I don't know how I would manage all of this, but I think it is important to make sure that if we're going to assume parents have a role, that they understand exactly how to fulfill that role. That's super important.
Absolutely, and we offer resources. So if you go to Fairplay's website, which is at fairplayforkids.org, we also house something called the Screen Time Action Network, which has resources for families, and it has work groups. So whatever your particular interests, whether it's early childhood or screens in schools, there are other ways that parents can get involved if they have the time and the inclination, but there are resources there as well. Our partners at Phone Free Schools Movement have resources, and Mary Rohde's group, Parents SOS, has really helpful and important resources. It's so great to be able to tap into something and help educate yourself so you can have an informed conversation with your kids.
Thank you so much. And Julie, I know you're dying to get into the conversation. I could see it in your eye contact here. So Julie, you're the founder of Mothers Against Media Addiction, which is a great title. But one of the cool things I think is this 500 people in this room already know it is addicting, because years ago perhaps that was an uphill battle to have people understand that this was a problem. Everybody understands it's a problem. Now we're trying to figure out how to solve it. So what does your organization think about, A, the way to solve it, and what would constitute digital literacy?
Thank you. So Mothers Against Media Addiction uses the acronym MAMA, so it's easy to say. We are a grassroots movement of parents fighting back against media addiction and creating a world where real-life experiences and interactions remain at the heart of a healthy childhood. We are not only mothers, we are fathers, aunts, uncles, teachers, grandparents, and many others who have begun to recognize, as Graham said so eloquently earlier, that technology shapes our experience. And so it shapes us not only intellectually, but neurobiologically. So for me, media, you asked about digital literacy, but I'd prefer to answer the question about media literacy.
Well, let me ask you that question, because I was going to ask
Sure.
you this. So just as a follow-up, what is the difference, in your opinion, between the terms media literacy and digital literacy? That was going to be a follow-up question, but go for it right now.
Well, digital literacy is referring to things online. Media is all kinds of media. And so we have known, as long as there have been humans, that whatever you expose people to in terms of information helps shape their experience. So we have known for many decades what types of environments help shape healthy children. And we have known what type of environments or what type of information or exposure creates unhealthy children. It's no surprise that if a child is growing up in a home where there is abuse or violence, addiction, that it will create trauma and that will affect their ability to learn. But we didn't really think when we all adopted smartphones and began using social media and letting our kids do that they were going to be exposed to content about those kinds of things at scale. And so I've been a journalist for 20 years. I covered the youth mental health crisis. I worked at the New York Times, and before that at Newsweek, and I wrote extensively about suicide. And when I saw suicide, which was been increasing in adolescence, and other mental health problems start trickling down to children at younger and younger ages, I was so alarmed as a parent of 3 New York students that I realized we needed to take decisive action. So part of being media literate as adults means recognizing when it is appropriate to use technology and when it's not. Tech companies, as Jeff said earlier, exist for profit, and that's it. And their products are designed to maximize profit. They are not designed to maximize well-being. They are not designed to maximize education. They are not designed to enhance democracy. And as a mother of 3 boys who was kind of lost when my children were born, I owe everything to their teachers who helped me understand the critical importance of children acquiring social and emotional skills, of acquiring intellectual building blocks in order, because the sequencing of learning is critically important. So one of the things we've observed at MAMA is that because of all the money that tech companies have, because of the intrusion of tech into our lives, because of the wide adoption of tech in commercial spaces, schools have felt like they have to adopt technology. And unfortunately, the risks are not always considered. So even things that sound as benign as Google Classroom, we are seeing give children access to everything on the internet, including sometimes pornography. I've heard about students who were issued tablets, and there was access to YouTube, and within a very few number of seconds or videos, they are shown videos that promote self-harm. There's a fact sheet out there some of you can pick up if you'd like. Our website is joinmama.org, and the way we work is by setting up chapters in different communities where parents can come together in person, provide support for one another for choosing to put kids and real-life experiences ahead of technology. And I think the data on children's academic performance is telling us that if we continue to allow their attention spans to be fractured over and over, it's kind of not surprising that we're seeing reading and math scores going down.
Sure. So in addition to working with families, which is principally what you do, could you explain to them what role you have, if any, in working directly with school districts? Because so many school districts are represented here today.
So at MAMA, we have a three-part mission. It's parent education. It's demanding that phones get out of schools for the day so that kids could learn, and it's also demanding safeguards. We know that parents and teachers alone cannot possibly ensure these products are safe for kids. We need our lawmakers to step up and ensure that there's basic safeguards. You know, we wouldn't allow our kids to go on roller coasters until there were harnesses, and these products need to have appropriate safeguards so that kids are not exposed to dangerous or harmful information, as too many of them have been. Our parent groups work with their individual school districts to provide whatever support they can. We are forming partnerships with a number of groups. I'm a longtime member of Fair Play Screen Time Action Network and think the world of the Phone Free Schools Movement Toolkit that has come out. But what I keep hearing from teachers, principals, social workers, and superintendents is that the hardest obstacle they face to implementing a phone-free environment is parents. We parents, and I count myself in this because I assure you there is no parenting mistake I haven't made many times over. You know, we adopted these technologies. We use them, we model them, and we've seen more and more where we are relying on apps to do things. And so the more that we can support parents in pushing back, the more we can show up for our teachers and our schools to say, okay, what do you need us to understand about why kids need to be able to give their full attention to their teachers during the school day? That is the work that Mom is trying to support.
Yeah, and again, I commend Melinda for getting this panel together because, you know, I'll speak for myself. I wasn't as familiar with what all of you do, and I know in the education space, it's very important for us to know that we are all supported with this very common goal to protect our children. That's so very, very important. Amany, you're last on this list, but you're very close to me here. Amany used to be a school board member, and we know each other for many, many years. So Amany, representing the PTA, we already heard from Kyle Belkipsky at the very first panel. She was a moderator, a good friend of mine. So what's the PTA's thought about all of this? You guys represent just a couple people like parents, teachers, et cetera. So what's your view on this?
And all the children.
And all the children,
We
yeah.
are the only advocacy organization that represents the voice of children.
Yeah, that's why you're last on this seat here. Yeah. Yep.
But of course, the key letters are the parents and the teachers and how we're going to work together on this major issue that we're all realizing by showing up here today is worthy of our attention. I know that New York State PTA conducted a mental health survey in the past couple of years. So we did it in 2022 as well as 2023. We got a much bigger response in 2023. Over 2,000 parents responded, and they kind of ranked all mental health illnesses or issues or challenges that we listed in terms of their significance, or they may feel their child or other children they know are struggling with. And number one was, no surprise, anxiety. And the second one was social media. And is the anxiety related to social media? We can ask that question too. I'll briefly tell you. Third was depression. Fourth was bullying. Again, could be related. Suicide and suicidal thoughts. Cyberbullying was a distinct category by itself, but it's pretty much bullying on social media. Substance use and youth violence. And is the violence, again, promoted by their social media exposure? So these, again, we have percentages, we have other areas of mental health that they responded to. We realized that the effects are really extremely disturbing and are not to ignore or walk away from. We're delighted that part of our students in New York's curriculum is going to be digital literacy. It's overdue because we developed all those devices and websites and apps that they've been on for a very long time. My firstborn is now 31, and he's been playing video games his almost his whole entire life. And we tried to regulate, we tried to control what they watched, but again, the violence that we talked about very early on when these apps first came out is not going anywhere. And you wonder, again, what it instills in them and if we're seeing behaviors based on what they're watching. So what PTA is doing, we're not sitting and only, worrying about the outcomes, but National PTA, and we're part of a bigger national organization, obviously, has developed this PTA Connect is the name of the program. And if you go on pta.org, it's an easy website, you will find and look up PTA Connected. It's actually 6 different programs that are intended to educating parents on how to manage this, because social media and the internet is not going away. We may take the phones away all day at school, but they come home and on weekends and evenings and sometimes at night when you're sleeping, and they reach out to others that you may not know, and they're at risk, obviously. So we want to educate parents on how to have these conversations. The conversations between caregivers and children do not start with just the internet and devices. It starts from childhood with healthy and clever conversations and positive conversations on more primitive things than the device they're going to get. So it starts early at home, and every family is extremely unique. And first of all, the personalities of their children, even your children, are different from each other in the same family. But every family is extremely unique in its structure and in what is going to work for their children and what doesn't. I cannot talk to my daughter the same way I talk to my son. And they laugh at that because the relationship is very different. They're different characters and personalities. How are we educating parents in conducting these communications that are going to build up to when you give them their first device? And we're not supposed to start the conversation after we hand them a device. That communication happens leading up to before we hand them a device.
Well, you hit on something which I think is the most important part of what this panel is talking about. Because throughout the day, we've been talking about possibly removing cell phones during the school day. And I think everybody's acknowledging, particularly with what you just said, that even if we achieve that, whether it be from statewide legislation requiring everyone or whether every district decides to do that, we still have a major problem if kids are not digitally literate, because they can still be bullied, they can still be picked upon, and the whole concept that we're trying to achieve here is to protect our children, right? So that's super important. And on that, I just want to ask the entire panel the following question, because I assume this room has been very moved, not only because we began this conversation this morning with Mary Rohde, and I don't know you, Mary, if you're still here, but I know that you impacted me greatly today, because, and everyone, I think, because you made this very clear to us that there are some incredibly horrible consequences that will befall us and families if we don't get this right. I think that's the number one takeaway, certainly from today. So if we all accept the fact that we need to have our kids be digitally literate, and thank you, by the way, for that clarification about media literacy, because that's important, how do we get there? And this is the question for all of you, and it's kind of almost a devil's advocacy question. Because the question would be, if some people say, that we can't take cell phones away from kids, because how would you then be able to teach digital literacy while simultaneously implementing device restrictions, right? You have your hand up, I'll go with you first. But that's a very important question for not only us to discuss, but for all of you, because if you're going to be ambassadors for why cell phone limitations make sense pedagogically and as a matter of public policy, we need to be able to explain how we're going to get this part right. Go ahead, David.
So statistics show that kids are on their devices for hours at home. And we've heard today about the fact that taking them away in school gives kids a break for the hours of school. That doesn't mean that the child is not going to be on devices at all.
Right.
Now, if a parent decides to not have the child on a device at home, especially at a young age, that's super, and we can talk about how to get digital literacy at that point. But it's really a smokescreen to say, oh, you need to have kids have digital literacy. Let's go back. I mean, Julie first raised about Google Classroom. What an ingenious idea by Google. Not only putting their devices in schools, putting their platforms in schools. Kids are one click away from YouTube, but it gives the whole aura, like Google Classroom, like Google is part of the education system. They're to be trusted. Have you ever seen the digital literacy program that Google has, which tells you basically have a strong password and make sure you log out when you're done, and don't talk to people with raincoats in the digital world? It doesn't tell you that you can be manipulated and that you can be subject to bullying or any of the other harms. Data collection, targeted marketing, none of that is on there. I mean, to try to better answer your question though, if whatever use is right in your home, you can be having those conversations. So you can set limits, and if your child says, oh, my friend doesn't have limits, don't be so sure they're being completely honest, and have some conversations in the neighborhood about why you feel some limits are right in your home, but you can be having those discussions, and you can be talking about where your child is going. So we've all heard that example. I wouldn't drop my kid off at the YMCA and let them be in a closed room with no windows for 3 hours, and I don't know who's in there, and there's a good chance that there are adults. So why would you let your child just hang out in a room for hours where you don't know who they're talking to, what they're doing? Whatever you decide is the appropriate use in your home, you can be having those conversations about some of the risks, about the fact that doing things in moderation are best because you want your child to have room to read books and be creative and to imagine and to talk to their siblings and chase after them or whatever. Not just, be staring at a screen for hours and hours.
Right, but in addition to, saying they can have these discussions, I assume your whole stance, appropriately so, is they better be having these conversations, right?
They'd better be having these conversations, but that leads to a really important point. We should be talking about how to lift parents up, and Randi Weingarten said she thought this was the most important session of the day, and it's super important. But don't put in the background everything else we talked about today.
Right. No, of course.
We cannot put it on the shoulders of parents. We need the guardrails, okay? We need laws in place. When we realized how dangerous cigarettes were, we didn't have, as a community, a discussion for years and years. Parents need to get cigarettes out of the hands of kids. We said we need to stop advertising the kids, and we need to find other ways to make sure that kids aren't going to start
Even
smoking.
our Surgeon General said we should have warning labels, right? Just like cigarettes. Julie, you wanted to say something on this topic.
I was just going to say, raise your hand if you want your children or your students to grow up to be safe drivers, right? We want our kids to be safe drivers. Who thinks that to make sure they're safe drivers, we should start teaching them to drive at age 8 or putting 9-year-olds behind the wheel? There are certain tasks that we have decided are not developmentally appropriate for children. Right. They need certain neurological development, they need certain skills and awareness. And so I think that one of the things we've been doing, and we parents are to blame for this, is we've been handing kids devices with apps on them that are not suitable for children. They're designed to be addictive, and then we tell them not to use it too much, right? And we adults can't control ourselves, so asking kids to do that is too much. And we also know that many of the leaders of these tech companies who have made these products, they send their kids to Waldorf schools. Steve Jobs told the New York Times years ago that his kids had never used an iPad. They were a low-tech house because they saw the value in acquiring basic building blocks like writing, reading, playing, interacting. And so, I don't mean to get too grandiose, but I do feel like we are facing sort of an esoteric question as a species. Do we want to live in a world that is tech first, where everybody is online all the time, we say it's inevitable, and we start giving our kindergartners lessons on how to be digital citizens? and then take away all that time they would be spending learning how to read, write, acquire the basic building blocks of social, emotional, and academic health? Or do we want to say, no, our priorities are to raise healthy, happy human beings who know how to function in society, know how to have relationships, look people in the eye, and also are successful students? That's where Mama is.
Yeah, and part of the message today has been, I know you would agree with this based on what you just said, that it's not even a question of teaching and modeling behavior. Since the algorithms are set up to acquire the result of addiction, right? And we heard from a student today who indicated, I can't be blamed for that, right? That's the way this works. So obviously what everyone's working on with respect to national legislation to outlaw that, that's the only thing that could presumably be super successful, because we can argue till we're blue in the face as to what's right. Some people are going to heed that warning and many people won't. But obviously if the device is less dangerous, we might be in a better position. Amany, I know you wanted to say something.
The voice of youth has been extremely important to us, and they have cried for help. They may be refusing or rejecting the idea of the phones away for any period of time, even in your home, but then they will actually share how they've been able to communicate better, build friendships, get more rest, get more work done, go outside and play and enjoy the outdoors, et cetera, et cetera. So we really need to know that children and youth like having rules and guardrails. They are not creatures who want to be free to do whatever they want, even though it may seem that way. I've heard in another panel a youth saying, my parents did not regulate my internet time or what websites I was on. I really wish they did. They should have. So when you hear a youth saying that, in retrospect, that's eye-opening. But we have fallen behind as parents. We're talking in a space where they are the experts more than we are. How many of us have asked our kids to show us how to do something on the computer all the time? Since they were younger, not just that they're in their 30s now. So that generation gap that we knew between us and our parents is now much broader and dangerous, because we're talking to them about space they know more about than we do. So we have to, as part of that Smart Talk program that PTA has, to teach ourselves and learn the space they're in. Get on the apps that they're getting on, learn how to navigate them, and talk to them about their safety and the privacy issues and how to protect themselves.
Thank you. So Yvette, all the way down here, we can't communicate because you're so far away, but did you have a comment that you wanted to make on this question here?
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, you're hearing from all of us about the wealth of resources that are available to all of us to either, one, learn, to share with our schools, to share with our students. And I think this does involve a whole community approach. I mean, shout out to New York for who's really leading the way in this discussion, looking at the research. What are our kids telling us? What are our parents telling us? What our educators are telling us? And then what do we need to learn this stuff? What do we need as adults to learn AI literacy? What do we need to learn digital literacy? I mean, we know that our young people are so wise, and they're learning these things at a faster rate than us adults and actually utilizing them. So how can we continue to move forward with ourselves? And then having that discussion with our young people and being able to have that dialogue, whether it's, like I said, these lessons and these resources that you're hearing here, whether it's going home and setting up your own systems that work for your household, but being able to make sure, knowing that these are our kids' lives, and we have the resources that we've been talking about, we have the policymakers making those decisions. And so it does really require all of us to kind of step up, learn, and be able to utilize what we're talking about and the resources that we have at hand right now.
Right, and I think the first point, right, is to recognize we have a problem. And that when we started with Mary, it's pretty palpable what that problem is, right? And so now the question here, at least in our state, and thank you for giving us a shout out that we're trying to get ahead of the curve, but it's how do we get this right for our kids? And again, failure can't be an option. Jeff, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
I guess I was just going to say that, and I'm going to relate to the school, I can't help it, school person. The most important adult in a school building is the teacher. How many times, and I raised kids, and I have 4 grandchildren in a public school now, did those kids come home, and I had been hammering away at a message on some moral lesson, some learning lesson, whatever, could say it 100 times, but if the teacher said it at school, then it was the truth. We can only do this if we do this together with parents and understand the power that is in the room if you are an educator. And my challenge is give yourself a safe space at school too. So no matter what your policy is, make sure that you're not stuck on your phone when you're supposed to have this phone-free environment, or you're trying to pair back with the kids. And go ahead, as a faculty, develop a space where you can go use it where it's not in front of the kids, whatever. But you all remember, when I grew up, there used to be the smoking rooms for the adults, and those same people would be on hall duty busting the kids who were smoking in the bathroom. Yeah, okay, I get it, you know. So we just need to make sure that we're consistent. And I think the other thing I challenge us as adults, with, if you have children in your home, let's meet halfway for a week. Let's have a challenge for the week. Do not like a single thing on your phone or forward a single thing to anybody. Just that. I'm not saying don't use your phone, don't check the news or all that. Don't like anything. Don't interact with it. And don't forward it to another human being, because that's what the artificial lack of intelligence wants you to do. Just do 1 week. See if you can do it for 1 week.
Can you imagine like the pop-up ads you wouldn't get? Wouldn't that be awesome? You know, so Graham, the underlying question that we were exploring was, if we lock up our phones, how are we going to teach digital literacy? Now, you're a perfect person to answer this question because your company is predicated on locking phones up. So what's your response to that?
Well, I think it's tempting to jump into the middle of the knot and kind of say, how are we going to teach young people to navigate the web? My personal belief and what I've seen for young people is kind of, once you're on the internet, you're in the pool. You're either in the shallow end or the deep end, but either way, you're getting wet. So the point is, how to navigate and build good habits and know what is what needs to be against a backdrop of what is. And the only way to do that as a young person is to go through and build a framework of relating to the world and a worldview based on your primary experiences and your relationships in it. And I think if we all look at our own perspective on the internet and the way we navigate it, if we think we do it reasonably well, it's because our reality is rooted in something that we can touch and feel, in relationships that tell us and give us feedback about what things are. So to me, the question of how to approach it is something like that. And I would just ask everyone to think for a moment in a school setting. Imagine going to high school, going to a school dance, and knowing that at any moment, your most embarrassing moment could be posted on the internet forever for everyone to see. It's no wonder that young people are anxious. It's not just about what you see on social media, it's the nature of the tool and what it opens up. And that is a paralyzing effect on not just young people, but on civil society, all of us in this room. If you're trying to have any private conversation or any sense of intimacy without the idea of privacy, it's not conceivable. So if you back up on how do we teach young people that, we have to talk to them about it. We have to talk to them about the tools and what they can do and what it means to film someone and post it. But that, in my opinion, that element, that's rational thought, and that's very important, but it needs to be paired with the experience of what it's like to be without those things. Because without it, it's words bouncing up against a flashing screen. And the fact is we're hypervisual animals, and these things are built to be and do what they do. We all know that. We've read the white paper. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things in the education space we've been exploring, and Jeff knows this at the State Education Department, is, you know, all of the statistics that tell us that punitive discipline is not effective. And we need to get to a place where we're more about restorative practices, getting kids in the education space to understand the consequences of their misbehavior, right? So they can not only be better people, but understand how they're affecting in a very negative way other persons. And based on what you just said, Graham, you know, I don't know the perfect way to do this on the internet, but it's like, you know, kids think it's perfectly acceptable at that dance, as you were just describing, to mock and ridicule somebody. And maybe they haven't thought through how they might have created in that kid a desire to kill themselves, or a desire to just have no self-esteem. I think it's just something all of us as adults need to ponder also, because beyond digital literacy, how do we teach people to be ethically and morally responsible from a device or through a device that is just designed to be reprehensible. Yeah, go ahead.
If you think of it, if you think of it, there's no decency button on any of these platforms, right? There's either like or don't like or forward. So just being wrapped up in that whole popularity contest of being the one with the most likes and people sharing your stuff.
I mean, they even rate us as an Uber passenger.
Exactly.
I'm a 5, apparently. I didn't know that.
Hey,
I guess I'm a nice guy.
congratulations.
Yeah.
Not a humble brag.
But, you know, you're
We
taking...
all think you're a 5, Jay.
Yeah.
But if you're coming out of that realm of interacting and looking people in the eye and being compassionate into just the quick clicks and the visual stimulation, you know, you're being removed from humanity.
Yeah. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Because this is where it really matters. Because this conversation this morning, continuing now, our last session, is all about how do we protect our kids? And this is really an important element of this. Does anybody have any other thoughts? Go ahead, Yvette.
I would just say it's about protecting our kids, but also engaging with our kids
Yeah.
around this. And thinking and being able to have those questions and asking those questions. And you're right, like working alongside them to see how they're using it, asking them how they're feeling about it, and building that not only just discussion, but relationship with them so that they could be more reflective as they go on into their life and not make the adult mistakes that I'm making every day with social media and whatnot, so that they're going and making those conscious decisions and thinking through.
Yeah, I mean, I know as an older guy, I didn't have to worry about this when I was younger. We had the bully on the playground. You all knew who that was, usually this large, not so bright person. But now, of course, they're lurking in the internet in ways that are just so nefarious. Go ahead.
When my first son was born, there were no iPhones, and Mark Zuckerberg worked at a small company called the Facebook. And by the time I took my middle son to pre-K at PS 29 in Brooklyn, every single parent in the neighborhood had a smartphone and was photographing their kid all day, every day, for no reason. And I guess we didn't realize it, but we were inadvertently teaching our children that everything we do should be photographed and posted and is appropriate for that.
Yeah.
And now my third son just started high school, and even though he's not allowed to have TikTok because of what it does to attention spans, I can't stop him from seeing TikToks because his friends send it to him. YouTube has gone to shorter and shorter reels. Snap has gone to shorter and shorter reels. So what's happening is not just an individual thing, but it's a change in our whole society. And, you know, I would love it if we could answer the big question you asked about teaching morality and manners and all those things. You know, if we could solve that in this panel, that'd be amazing.
I was hoping you would.
Yeah, I can't do that. But what I can say is that we have a choice to make about what kind of society we want to have. Is it a society grounded in human interaction, human experience, relationships, and communities? Or is it a society grounded in the digital world that is a collection of products made by companies looking to maximize profit?
Speaking of profit, let me just ask you this question. I'm going to bring Amany into the conversation because I know she wanted to say something. But, you know, Randy Weingarten before was speaking about Mark Zuckerberg and others. And, you know, I think most people would say that they may not be as ethically sensitive as we would like them to be. I'll say it nicely. But do you think, and this is really for everybody, do you think that our expectations are silly in that if we accept the fact that leopards have spots and then we get angry at the leopard for having spots, and what I mean by that in English is these are for-profit companies. They set up algorithms to make a whole bunch of money, and they're super wealthy and super successful. And then Congress takes them, rakes them over the coals for how they haven't protected. Isn't really this dependent upon legislation? Because we can't expect these companies to be responsible because just by virtue of who they are, they're never going to be. Or am I too cynical?
Mr. Zuckerberg has also said he thinks it needs to be regulated, so I think that is something we should listen to him on. You know, last year, an electric skateboard was introduced onto the market. And within the first 3 months of the product being available, I think 7 children died. And so we immediately recalled that. Mary Rohde is but one person who is in the Parents SOS group. The Social Media Victims Law Center represents 300 families whose children have died or been seriously harmed because of social media harms. And forgive me, they represent 3,000 families, and they have brought 300 cases. The scale of harms is hard to fully express because unfortunately some parents don't even realize what's happening online. And so I think that, again, we have a choice to make. The harms of social media have caused havoc in society, not only on our children's mental health, but on our democracy. It's destroyed journalism, and it's almost impossible now to tell which news sources are trustworthy or not. And so I think the investment that we're making in teaching media literacy to our children and to our parents and to working together is really an investment in the future, not just only so kids can grow up healthy, but so that we can return to a healthier ecosystem.
Right, it's not just an investment, right? It's really the preservation of democracy, and I don't want to be sounding like it's hyperbole. I mean, I was telling people just the other day, I remember back in the day when there was this thing called the Vietnam War, Walter Cronkite, the venerated journalist from CBS, would tell you what happened in battle that day. And then the country was divided deeply as to whether this was a moral war or not. And so that division was healthy for people to explore. But what we didn't question were the facts of what was explained by the media. People believed the media. I'm not saying we should be sycophants to the media, but if everything is just defined as fake news, it places us in a position where we're having arguments over things that aren't even true. That's really very problematic, and that gets to the whole media literacy part, which is absolutely part of this discussion, right? Go ahead, David.
If I can just go back to your point, your question about whether you were being too cynical. If you were looking to hire a babysitter and you knew of 3 businesses in your town, you would have the right and the ability to look into who was responsible. If one person's doing a great job and another person throws all the kids into a room and lets them play darts, you'd say, well, I'm not going to hire that person. But these companies have gotten so huge, and they're hiding the ball on what their practices are and what the impacts are. So the market is not working the way it's supposed to. Parents are not able to say, no, let's not use Instagram in our home because they're preying upon our kids. And so you're not being cynical. I do think businesses should be doing the right thing. They should realize that they're not going to make money if they're hurting our kids. And because they're not, we really urgently need the protections from our lawmakers right now.
Right. So obviously, I think one of the major takeaways, I think everybody on this panel would agree, it's a multifaceted way of trying to get to a solution. Is educating people, making sure the laws are present that protect. All of those things are really important, but the education part that you were speaking about before is so important because so many parents don't really even understand what's at stake. That's the scary part of this. Amany, you wanted to say something.
As Julie said, it is very difficult to quantify the damage. We can say an accident was based on a device and therefore, ban the device or take it off the market. It's very hard to know how big the damage is because if they don't call it cyberbullying, we don't know what it was and we don't know what effect it has had on that youth. And also, besides the youth, we have lost, sadly, the ones who are traumatized and scarred for the rest of their life. How do you measure that? They've had unfavorable interactions. They've been exposed to things they should not have been exposed to at a very young age. So we cannot quantify the damage. That's why this is a very difficult thing to actually manage. But I'm going to say to the point that you were making, Jay, about how do we teach children to be decent people.
Yeah.
I must say, we have to start with ourselves. What role models are we setting for them? What are we showing our child at home when somebody says something you disagree with? Or when somebody has a point of view that you don't agree with? How are we reacting? Okay, how are we acting on social media? What posts are we sharing ourselves? What are we liking? If we hold ourselves to a higher standard, I am a firm believer we will set a role model for this generation to follow the suit.
Yeah, it's beautifully stated, and obviously we all have to serve as exemplars to our kids. I know this is a message that we at the School Boards Association provide to our school board members. If they're sitting there with dysfunctionality and arguing, and then there's viral YouTube videos of their meeting, and then they're trying to proclaim that kids need to act in a more civil way, it gets to your point about cigarettes. I'll smoke, chain smoke, and then tell my kid not to smoke. Not exactly a great exemplar. So that's really important. So at the tail end of this, let me just sum up this. First of all, I really feel humbled to be in all of your presence because each and every one of you in your respective positions has made it your mission to get us to a better place. And many times you perhaps don't get thanked for that. So I want to just say thank you for that. And thank you for the resources that you're going to make available to the world, because they need that. Our kids need that. And I think this conversation, to me, the most gratifying part, and I think David said this before, is that there's 500 people in this room. It shows that when Melinda invites you, you come. That's important. But it also says that we all see tremendous importance and value of doing something kind of interesting and important, like protecting our kids, right? We are at a crisis point. And so I think we should hopefully be able to, the takeaway for all of us is to go back to our respective places of work, business, schools, and do right by our kids and take on these messages and use the resources that we can use so that we know at the end of the day we're doing a little bit better tomorrow than we did today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a nice round of applause for the panel. Thank you.
Can we get another round of applause for Jay Warona and this amazing panel? So before we have our table discussions, I'm going to give my closing remarks now so that you can spend the remaining time chatting with the other folks at your table. But I want to say this has been an amazing day. Thank you to all of you who came, participated, were inspired and engaged by these conversations. I hope you are leaving as inspired to take action as I am. I want to thank our co-sponsors, the PTA, the School Boards Association, the school administrators, and the Council of School Superintendents who helped promote this. But I also want to say it's so important that all of you are in the room for this conversation. It is not something that any one of our organizations can accomplish alone. Sometimes I have my teacher hat on and I think about the perspective that I bring, when I'm teaching and a kid takes a call while I'm trying to teach math, right? That has actually happened. And then I think about my role as a parent. I have two 11-year-olds who don't have phones yet. Every day, it's every day we talk about it, not because I bring it up, right? But I'm afraid for them. I'm afraid for the world that they are growing up in. Because even though I am really immersed in this work, as so many of you are, they can figure things out faster than me. My son, Andrew, I'm going to tell this short story. He made a Google slide deck to convince me that he should have Fortnite when it wasn't quite age appropriate yet. And then he had cited Common Sense Media. He said, these are the people you work with. They said, with appropriate parental controls, that 11-year-old, and so I said, okay. But as soon as we had set it up, right, and I had tried to block him off from all of the unknown people contacting him on this platform, and I had done all the research, I found on Google how to get around your parents' parental controls on Fortnite, right? Even the best barriers that we put up, kids will attempt to find a way around them. So parents need help, and I speak on behalf of them. We need support of the entire education community. We need to give our kids a break for 7 hours a day. I truly and honestly believe that they need that. They need that so that they can have space to learn the self-regulation skills that are required to go out and be adults. And so I am encouraged by the conversation we've had here today. I'm encouraged by the commitment to fight back against companies who are trying to profit off of our kids and do harm. I'm encouraged by the school districts who have led by example and who are talking about what they say is transformational in their schools when they've created distraction-free learning environments. And I'm really encouraged by this last panel of folks who are talking about not only how do we protect our kids during these 7 hours, but how do we give them the skills at home and at school so that they can be productive adults for their lifetimes. So thank you for being a part of this amazing conference, this amazing day. Our work is not over. I want to thank the NYSET staff who have helped put this on, including Lonnie and Leslie. This was a really incredible experience, and I hope that you go back and make change in your own communities. We will be in touch. This entire program has been recorded, so if you would like to access and share the conversations we've had here today with your colleagues and friends and family, please do so. Thank you for coming.